Okay, I was talking about Derrida's difficult concept, différance, or I don't care how they pronounce it, okay? But the basic idea was this. Now, Derrida was trying to criticize what he calls metaphysics, according to him, which was nothing else than the philosophy or thinking of the presence. Okay. Yeah. Now, this term may sound to your ears as a strange term, but by presence, actually, what is meant is nothing else than taking the existence of things as given. Okay, that's all. Right. Assuming that things do exist in and on and for themselves. Okay. Now, the critique began to be developed by Jacques Derrida in 1960s or late 1960s, is primarily dealing with about this problem. Okay. Now, the question is, and on this question depends both the tradition of idealism as well as materialism. Okay. Now, some says that, somebody like Plato was saying that actually this world, what we are seeing here in this transitory world, okay, is not the reality. Okay. The real was the ideas, the world of ideas. Okay, forms. When we say ideas, actually we are saying forms, as if they are empty molds, okay, which is about to be filled by a demiurge, a crafts god, okay, by the what they call unformed matter. You know, unformed matter is here, molds are here. Okay, so God is taking that unformed matter and filling the molds with it and creating those ephemeral things that we experience here in this world. Okay, the trees, the human beings, the horses, or whatever you imagine. Okay, have their own molds. This is why it has been translated. Eidos has been translated as forms. Okay, simply because when we say idea, translate eidos as idea, there emerges that confusion that the ideas, ultimately the entities of thinking. Okay, you have such ideas, I have such ideas. And in that sense, they can easily be understood as the property of consciousness or a thinking mind. Okay, whether this mind is a human mind or a divine mind, doesn't make much difference. So, however, the Platonic ideas were different. Okay, they were different from God's, and they were not the creations of gods. Okay, but some craftsman god, okay, was operating with these forms to create what we have here in this world, in this transitory world, as things. Okay, so the things are nothing else than the imperfect replicas of these perfect molds. So what real is real are these forms, not these imperfect replicas. So, for instance, if you want to have knowledge of things, the object of your knowledge cannot be these things that we experience in the world. Okay, that was the origin of the so-called idealistic stance. Okay. But not idealistic as the modernity attributed a certain sense to the term, Within the context of modernity, ideas turn out to be the property, the components of thinking, whether divine or human. Okay? In Platonic sense, they were not such. They have nothing to do with thinking. They were the real essences, real existences, and thinking would necessarily, therefore, concern itself with them. Okay. Now here, this was the one side of the argument. The other side of the argument were claiming that ideas doesn't matter much. Okay, they are the idealistic creations of thinking, and in contrast to these ideas, what really exists is matter. Materialism, the origin of materialism, again, can be found in ancient Greek in the theories developed by so-called atomists, especially Leucippus and Democritus. Okay? So according to them, there were, those tiny little particles, okay, either swerving in the air in the form of a vortex, or falling down in parallel lines, and making some spheres, therefore colliding, and in their collision creating the rise of the things, okay? 2 particles, 3 particles, or more particles coming together and producing something that we can call an object, a real thing in the world, okay? So these were 2 rival views. What's at stake here, actually, in Derrida's approach to the question, what's at stake here is exactly to negate, to reject such 2 positions which both of them share the given character of the world, okay? So their common point, actually, is the given character of the world, either in the form of ideas or in the form of material things, whatever they are, okay? But the world here is conceived from both of the perspectives as given, okay? Now, the Derridian point, in his insistence on the concept of difference, in his critique of what he called metaphysics of presence, is exactly about this, okay? So when he criticized the metaphysics of presence, when he criticized a philosophy thinking of presence, what he meant is actually is this, okay? Nothing is given, okay? Nothing is given. Actually, we have seen this in structuralist statements, you know, already. But these structuralist statements were limited to the language itself, okay? Cecil was saying that in language there are only differences without positive terms and so. Now, the interesting point in this that this linguistic statement gives an example, constitutes an example of something, if you like. Let me use here in this connection, even though I haven't read anything like this in Derrida himself. He uses a rather different language, okay? I take recourse to the Aristotelian language. Actually, coming into being and passing away, okay? Nothing is here by itself, okay? And everything is in the process of coming into being and passing away. What does it mean, okay? It means, actually, that nothing is given. But its difficulty is that when I say nothing is given, actually I'm taking the ground for the possibility of a group of things, so to speak, okay, to come into being and pass away, while operating this coming into being and passing away on a certain solid ground. Okay. So things are coming into being and passing away, coming into being and passing away. Each coming into being and passing away, a different thing is produced, okay? But the question is where? Where they are produced, okay? Now, the Heideggerian answer to this question in relation to the possibility of beings revealing itself on a ground which in his language described as the clearance was nothing else than the clearance offered by Dasein, human being, okay? So things are coming and passing away, where in the openness supplied by the concernful dealings of the human beings, okay, in this area, in the area of the activity of the human beings, things are coming and going away, passing away, okay. However, as you can see, this is quite an anthropomorphic interpretation of the situation, okay. Things owe their existence. Actually, later Heidegger would assume a rather critical attitude towards this approach. So that one has to find another ground for this. But this ground should be a no ground at the same time, okay? Simply because if I assume the existence of the ground prior to the existence of the things, actually I am doing the same thing, okay? I am assuming the existence of a certain given something, okay? So the difficulty lies in here. And Derrida makes use of that Saussurean statement, okay? In language, there are only differences without positive terms. By positive terms, we mean the perceived units. Okay. For instance, this can be a letter. For instance, we are talking about then, in that case, the difference between A and E. Okay. And the statement implies that, actually, A and E are not pre-given entities prior to difference. Okay. So, their differentiation, what we are talking about here, is nothing else than their differentiation, their acquiring a certain determination, okay, as distinct from E, for instance, as distinct from A, and A is distinct from E, okay. Apart from this difference, actually, the idea is that there is no E's and I's, okay. That's the point. Yeah. And actually, Saussure was able to show this, okay. When you consider the different pronunciations in the language of or the speech acts of the speakers of a given language, for instance, you'll find out that there is no pre-given A or E, okay, that's all, okay. It's not an interesting point, actually difficult to conceive something, okay. In the differentiation, actually, a distinct A and E begin to emerge, if you like. Let me again use the Aristotelian language, come into being, okay? Before that, there was no such sound, no identifiable sound, okay? So this can also be applied to the analysis of the, therefore, signifiers, which are nothing else than the physical, you know, physical aspects of the sign, you know, either visible or audible aspects of the sign. Okay, somehow a sign makes its presence manifest. Okay, where on the sensibility of our understanding, comprehension. In other words, we should be able to see them, or we should be able to hear them, or in whatever way you like, we should be able to get in touch with them. Okay, this is called the physical aspect of the sign. Now, this analysis applied to the letters, actually one physical aspect of the sign, can also apply to the sounds or the compound organization of these things, okay, words. And these usually are referred as the sign, okay. So signs can be analyzed, and this constituting the signifier aspect, physical aspect of the sign. Now, Saussure, Derrida criticized, but I guess that he was not right on that ground. Saussure was able to extend this analysis to the discussion of the signifieds as well. Remember, one of the starting premises of Saussurean structuralism was that was to stress the impossibility of thinking prior to language. Okay. Now, yeah, the debate was hot in those days, but I don't know which party was right, but the claim of the structuralism, Saussurean structuralism, was that, okay, if you don't have any language, you would not be able to think, okay. That's that, okay. Simply because, according to this structuralist premise, okay, thinking can only be possible through the usage of a certain language, okay. Imagine yourselves, for instance, for a moment, as if you are having no language at all, or try to observe your own thinking, okay, and see if you think or if you make use of words, the structure of language in your thinking or not, okay. That's that simple. Everybody can experience with it, okay. Some artists would claim that thinking as an alternative point of view, thinking would turn out to be possible without taking recourse to language but rather by making use of images, for instance. But the problem with the images is this, okay, as it has been shown in Freud's interpretation of dreams, okay. The problem with thinking through the image is this, okay. The image, to be able to have a meaning in our thinking, or if you like, in our dream, should necessarily be related with other images as well, okay. So, without this being related with the other image, a singular image in a dream or a thinking does not have any meaning at all. Okay, that's the problem. And therefore, it is in this relating with the other image, actually, we are talking about the presence of the language. Okay? So, even the proposition goes forward by saying that it's possible to think through image rather than the words, okay? This cannot challenge that structuralist argument, statement, okay? Fine. This means that, however, okay, this same analysis, the same statement, can also be applied to the signified side of the sign. Okay, not only to the signifier, but to the signified sign. Okay, so it means, however, that okay, meanings or concepts in our mind, okay, in our thinking, are not pre-given entities, are not taken as pre-given entities. Okay, they should necessarily be thought of as a result, or if you like, as a produce of that interplay of difference. Okay. Again, difference turns out to be, what is difference? Is it something, a yardstick, okay, which would determine which this specific difference would produce what kind of entities? No, no, one cannot speak of difference, at least in Derrida's terms, as if it is something, okay? Difference, according to Derrida, is nothing else than that moment of interplay, okay, that's all. Interplay of forces. What forces? Now, by force, the notion of force, as we have seen throughout this course, actually originates or owe its importance to Nietzsche's contributions. You know? But the interesting point was force was that, and the most difficult point perhaps to grasp, was that a force is not something which exists in and for itself. Okay? So one cannot talk about the existence of forces, and the application of this idea, as we have seen in Michel Foucault's approach, generates a rather strange conceptualization of power, okay? Power is everywhere. Power cannot be owned by anybody or controlled by anybody. Power cannot be exercised by anybody. Even the subjectivities which we think pertaining closest to our own being are nothing else than the effects of power, etc., etc., okay? Now, this strange notion of power is nothing else than the relationship between what I have written down on board earlier, acting and being acted upon. Now, the strange point is that I'm writing down two words here, two verbs actually, okay? Now, in ancient Greek language, there were one single word for each. Poiein, and paskein. Okay. Pathos, or usually translated, the verb form of pathos, okay, usually translated as affects, okay. Or here, in the verb form, we can translate it, I hope, I guess, affection, okay. Not in the sense of the ordinary meaning of the term, okay. When you use affection in its ordinary sense, it translates in Turkish, I guess, duygu, duygulanım, or something like that. Okay, duygulanım may have some similarity to the original notion of paskein, but alternative translations, suffering, pain, okay, being affected, actually, that's all, okay? But the strange point in this, that they cannot be thought of as separate things, okay? Acting and being acted upon, okay? Or acting and suffering from an act which is done to you, okay, cannot be thought of as if separate moments of one and the same process, okay? Rather, they are one and the same moment, okay? They cannot be separated from each other, okay? The possibility of acting lies in its capacity of affecting, okay? The very existence of being affected owes its possibility to a simultaneous acting upon, okay? So they are closely connected. One cannot take. Therefore, the importance of this is that, for instance, we say that force or power is generated in confrontational situations. Now, the term confrontation may sound in your ears having some negative connotations, but not necessarily so, okay? Meeting with the others or coming together, I could say as well, okay? No problem with it, okay? So, or if you like, let me use a more neutral term, it originates in situations of being related to, okay? That's all. And the very meaning of being related to lays in the couple of these two verbs, okay? Being related to is nothing else than acting upon and being acted upon. Okay, that's all. So it is in that moment, in that process, we are talking about the generation of power. Okay, so, and generation of power in this situational confrontation, in this process of the generation of power, the result is the production of the opposing parties, if you like, confronting parties. The strange part is that here, the confronting parties, before that generation of power, due to that quantitative difference, which would later turn itself into a qualitative difference, okay, the moment of its turning into qualitative difference is the moment of the production of the parties confronting each other. Okay, if you like, so-called positive terms. Okay, so Derrida's point was this. Okay, and here the terminology, this terminology, enters into Derrida's discussion under the name of trace. Okay. Not that I am given a specific importance when I'm writing it down with red, but it was the only board marker left over there, okay? So then trace actually means the creation of an effect, okay? Creation or production of an effect, okay? An effect on the plane, where on the plane of the interplay of differences. This interplay of differences may seem to you, again, a rather mystical term, but it's not that mystical, simply because, for instance, the process we are talking about, the process, or that particular process of coming into being and passing away, okay, does not take place in thin air, in its suspense, in isolation from the other events, okay? There are many processes of coming into being and passing away surrounding this event, so to speak, and it is this ground, upon this ground, okay? Or to this ground, referring to this ground, we are talking about here the interplay of differences, okay? Many things are playing with many other things, so to speak, okay? Many individuals are being born while at the same time other individuals are dying. In the meantime, certain individuals experiencing their childhood, youth, adulthood, assuming a certain specific personality and gradually passing away, etc., okay? It is in this interplay of differences When we say interplay of differences, we are talking about this, nothing else, okay? It is on this interplay of differences and only forming something which will pass away, so to speak, the trace is left. The effect has been produced, if you like, okay? A certain event when you are growing or when you are an adult person, a certain event happens to you, creating a certain trace on whatever you are. Okay, this is what we are talking about. Okay, nothing else. However, this trace, Derrida would locate this trace. In that sense, I am now talking about, as you can see, can be located on two axes. Up to now, for instance, analysis tend to, and at one point Derrida develops against structuralism was that by rejecting diachronic analysis, structuralism therefore neglects this historical aspect. Historical, when we say historical, not only socio-historical, temporal aspect. By temporalization, actually, we are talking nothing else than this process of coming into being and passing away. Nothing is fixed, so to speak, okay? Everything is in this process. Of course, having different temporizations, meaning that a lifespan of an ordinary human being is different from the lifespan of an elephant, for instance, okay, or a tree, for instance, okay. Everything having their own temporization, so to speak, okay. So one cannot assert one single temporalization in the whole process. The result would be nothing else than one single history, okay? Production of one single history. So what's at stake? Actually, infinitely multiple histories, so to speak, okay? So the trace is everywhere. Therefore, when we are talking about trace, we should not only think about spatial relationships, for instance, the social or geographical distance between you and me right now, okay? But also the temporal, the effects of temporization, so to speak, the traces of the past as well as the traces of the future, okay? For instance, on my process of right now taking place, coming to be and passing away, okay? So I think about the future, or the future events open up or close themselves in accord with the world in which I find myself while I am in the process of forming myself in this or that way, and the past also brings its traces, okay? So, in my being here and now, okay, you can read the traces of the future and the past, as well as the traces of spatial relationalities in which I find myself, okay? So it's through these traces, actually, or if you like, translate them into that ordinary older language, through these production of effects on whatever I am, I come to be whatever I am, okay? And I began to pass away to be whatever I am, okay? This is the basic idea, okay? So I'm going to make certain quotations from Derrida in connection with these, and then leave this rather interesting text behind and pass to another text, okay? Okay, first, let's start with the difference. Okay, we have said this, in language there are only differences, etc., without positive terms, and there draws certain consequences from this, okay? The first consequence to be drawn from this, I'm reading from Derrida here, okay, is that the signified concept is never present in and of itself. The point I already made, okay? Insufficient presence that would refer only to itself. Essentially and lawfully, every concept is inscribed in a chain or a system within which it refers to other concepts by means of the systematic play of differences. Now, he is talking about this time applying that statement to the signified parts, okay, is talking about the constitution of the signified as identifiable separate identities. In other words, for instance, I'm talking about the concept of horse that I have in mind, okay, as different from the concept of dog that I have again in mind, okay. Now, we usually tend to think that, following Lockean empiricism, for instance, the concept I have about dog or a horse comes from my experiences with the actual horse, okay. So the concept itself directly refers to what's usually called its referent, which is considered to be a given entity. A horse, you know, it's not my creation, after all. Okay, a dog I am talking about, not my creation, okay, or not the result of the creative efforts of my imagination. A dog is there, barking, biting me, etc. A horse is there, kicking me or eating the food that I had reserved for winter season. Okay, fine. They are as real as they can be. But the application of this tells us that, at least on conceptual level, in other words, our conceiving them, the primary factor, indeed, is not the experiences of the real horses that I have, okay, but rather the difference of the concept of horse from, say, the concept of the ass, from the concept of the lion, from the concept of the other whatever animal you like to name it. Okay, so my conceiving of the horse depends upon these interplay of differences. Okay. Unfortunately enough, however, if we do not stop here and continue with the analysis, we will find out that what we call referent in such situation, I mean the actual horse, the actual dog biting my leg, etc. over there, are also nothing else than the producers of those interplay of differences. Okay? Which means that none of these, neither signifier nor signified nor the referent, okay, do have any substantial in itself, for its self-existences. Okay? Everything emerges, if you like, only through being related with other things, so to speak. Okay? Another quotation. What is written as difference, then, will be the playing moment that produces, by means of something that's not simply an activity, those differences, those effects of difference. This does not mean that the difference that produces differences is somehow before them in a simple and unmodified, indifferent present. Difference is the non-full, non-simple, structured, and differentiating origin of differences. Okay. Thus, the name origin no longer suits it. Since language, which Saussure says is a classification, has not fallen from the sky. Okay. Now, as you can see here, when he says language, key writing, etc., what he has in mind is nothing else than a system of classification, or if you like, a system of differences. That's all. Okay. Now, not the language, Turkish, English, or whatever. Okay. Not the language of the science systems necessarily. Why language? What these people come to understand is nothing else than a system, more or less, as Heidegger would say, approximately and for the most of the time. Okay, systematic differences. Okay. Okay, since language, which Saussure says is a classification, has not fallen from the sky, its differences have been produced, are produced effects, but they are effects which do not find their cause in a subject or a substance. Okay, so they do not have any cause. They simply produce. Okay, but they are not there to produce something specific. Okay. Where was I? Gözlüğümde görmüyor ki. But they are effects which do not find their cause in a subject or a substance, in a thing in general, a being that is somewhere present, thereby eluding the play of difference. Okay? And then he talks about here the problematic relationship between cause and effect. Okay? Actually, as I said, when you separate these two verbs from each other as the distinct moments of a certain event, you'll find out that they simply refer to the cause and effect. Okay? There is an action here, and there an effect has been produced. Why? The effect is the result, if you like, effect of the cause as the action. Okay? But however, Derrida would reject such an approach. Okay? What he was trying to talk about, okay, was an effect without a cause. Okay? Simply because these two moments cannot be separated from each other. This is actually, this is nothing else than the moment of the interplay of differences. The same thing differentiating itself as the act and the effect produced by that act. Okay? It is the same thing, actually. Okay. We then would have to speak of an effect without a cause, which very quickly would lead to speaking of no effect at all. I have attempted to indicate a way out of the closure of this framework via the trace. Okay? This closure of the framework of cause and effect relationship, he tries to get out by making use of a different concept, trace, okay? Which is no more an effect than it has a cause, but much in and of itself outside its text is not sufficient to operate the necessary transgression. So then the trace, okay, is the unity of these two moments, which cannot be separated as cause and effect on the one hand, okay, and on the other hand, the trace in itself, without being inside an interplay of differences, is nothing at all. Is nothing at all, okay? It does not stand. It is not something that can stand in itself, okay? Actually, this problem has been tackled with in our earlier discussion when we were dealing with the question in Freud's thinking, question of the role of the material event in the origin of traumatic effect, in the generation of the traumatic effect. As you may remember, Freud was arguing that actually a certain event, this is called the materialist approach, you know, a certain event should have had taken place in the early life of the individual to be able to cause the later traumatic effect. Okay. Well, later on, Freud's analysis has shown himself, and he warns us back that, okay, indeed this is not the case, okay. What actually happens is that this same event occurs to many individuals, but in only a single minority of them producing such and such effects, okay. What is the conclusion we would, or Freud had to draw from this observation? He concludes that then the material effect is not the efficient cause of the effect, okay, but rather the ground or the interaction between the material event and the ground with which it comes to relate, to be related, okay, is the real point of the production of the effect, okay. Actually, this means that the trace in itself or the material event in itself has nothing to do with leaving anything at all or creating an effect at all, okay? So the crucial problem is that it is being related to this interplay of differences as the ground, okay? One can speak of trace in the sense of an effect, okay? Since there is no presence, and okay, before that, let me point out the last two words, importance of last two words in the above already made quotation. If you like, let me read it once again. Trace which is no more an effect than it has a cause, but which in and of itself, outside its text, is not sufficient to operate the necessary transgression. So what's at stake here is the internality or falling of the trace on a text, in a text, okay, where it has the possibility of creating a necessary transgression. This transgression is necessary. Why? Simply because without that transgression, there would be no trace at all. Okay? Actually, it is this transgression which is the effect of trace. Okay? And the transgression of what? Transgression of the prior system of the text. Okay? In other words, the introduction of each and every new sign into a system of language creates a transgression in that system, okay? Simply because it was not there prior to its entrance into there, okay? And its entrance into there creating a force, okay? Resulting in the rearrangement of the relations among all the other signs in that signifying chain, okay? So it's a very real and serious transgression what we have here, okay? A rearrangement of all of the elements, however tiny, however minor, introduction of a new word, in other words, into a language, okay, disturbs the prevailing relations or differences among the pre-existing signs in that language, okay? This is that transgression we are talking about, or Derrida is talking about here.